got a question, you can hold up your card and he'll come by and get it. We've got one here. I think Representative Cole maybe addressed it somewhat. This is from Allison Weintraub of the Bartlesville Examiner Enterprise. Do you believe the attention on the presidency has distracted Congress and the public from several important measures that are forthcoming, like the new health care plan and the tax reform plan? This was addressed to anyone who wants to pick that.
I'll take the first crack at it. There's no question it's distracting the public. I mean, there's only so much bandwidth out there, and people can only, take care of so many things. I think also, frankly, it's distracting the Washington media. All of us can sit up here and tick off a long list of things that have gotten done or that are moving, and yet again, that's not what the narrative is. I understand, look, when you've got the glamour of a potential scandal, and it might or might not involve the president, personally I don't believe it does, but we've got the investigations for a reason. We'll just let those play out accordingly. But I think, frankly, Congress is just, we had just to give you an example, we had an interesting hearing that was simultaneous with Senator Langford's Intel hearing with the Secretary of the Interior over in the Interior Appropriations Committee. We all joked at the beginning, nobody's watching us today. And that was true all over the Capitol, but all the attention was on one place. I have not seen to this point, though, that it's distracted Congress in any way. Again, I see legislation moving, I see appointments being taken up, I see people wrestling with real live problems, but I think that story doesn't get out very much.
One thing that I do think is slowing down the process is the administration needs to apply more focus on filling all of the various slots. The Senate can't address the individuals, can't do clearances, can't have the votes if they don't have names. We have an acting director at NASA, the National Space System. We have a secretary and undersecretary at USDA, but all the deputy spots are not filled in the nation's capital. We need people that we can work with in the administration. Now, I know that the traditional mold for how you do these things is different than this administration. Till 11 o'clock on election night, a lot of folks didn't think Donald Trump was going to be president. I'm not asking for a show of hands. I'm just saying the process that went on for months and laying down lists of people to be ready to go didn't occur, and now they're playing catch-up. But we need people offered up in those spots so that our friends in the Senate can do their work, so that we'll all have people to work with. That is impacting our ability to do our work.
Okay, the next question comes from John Denny Montgomery of the Purcell Register. It's addressed to any of you who want to take this one. What are your thoughts on the talk about privatizing air traffic controllers, and what effect would it have on Oklahoma with the training facility being located in Oklahoma City?
I'd be happy to address that. I think it's the dumbest thing we've ever thought about doing. Let me tell you why. We need modernization. No one would dispute that. But modernization and innovation is rarely pushed from the commercial airline industry. Most of it comes from general aviation, and it's pushed from Bubba flying around in his plane and realize that you could do Google Maps and kind of see where you are as you're flying in your cockpit in the last decade. And then now we have modernized cockpits. This notion that in general aviation you're going to have to put every time you land and every time you take off a fee, that's just absurd. What that will do is that will take all the work that Jim Inhofe did on third-class medicals for pilots so that you could keep older people that are still healthy and that they can fly, and they're out there and they're able to take Civil Air Patrol, Young Eagles. They're able to inspire young people to get up in the air. Now, they're not going to be able to afford to fly. Oh, by the way, others that come in and want to try to learn now that the cost just got even higher. And you said, well, okay, who cares? That's just, here's why it matters. No one's looking at it from the defense aspect. We are 1,000 pilots short in the United States Air Force. Ponder that a moment. Last year, not this year, but last year, the Air Force, for the first time in its history, did not meet its pilots quota at the United States Air Force Academy. And so now you've got this board that will come together where it's mostly commercial aviation, and they will determine how and the direction that we do our air traffic control. Even if I didn't agree that this is a dumb idea, I've got 6,500 employees at the Mike Monroney Center right here in the district who fully understand it. And people will say, well, yeah, but the union agreed that they ought to do this. That doesn't mean that the people did. The people are very much against this idea. The other problem that you have is that it is not going to make things safer. Name a time when we've taken the things that the government has done well, and there are some things that we do well. Defense, air traffic control. When's the last time we had a major airline disaster? Oh, you can't remember, because it hasn't happened. We have the safest record anywhere in the world, and people are making comparisons with Canada. Look, I love Canada. I've traveled all through it. I've driven thousands of miles on trackless roads up there. Wonderful people. Their population is the size of Texas. You can't make the same comparison. These are not things that we need to do. Now, I realize I'll be swimming upstream on this issue because everybody, like a pack of dogs lapping up antifreeze, think this is a good idea. There's going to be an accounting after it is lapped up. And what's going to happen is, in time, we will be having hearings. We're going to put $50 billion into private firms so that they're going to go out there and fix this, and then it's going to fail. We're going to have less safety, reduction in pilots learning to train, and a major unfunded liability impact for national defense. And then there'll be people like us with bony fingers and red faces going, how did you let this fail? Look in the mirror. If we let this thing happen, it is going to weaken everything that we do good in the aerospace and defense industry. But other than that, I don't have an opinion on it.
Let me make just a quick comment on it as well, and will not have the same verbal imagery that Steve had. But let me just say it this simple. The problem that has been identified is the next gen and how long it is taking to implement next gen. That is an acquisition problem that's right. We're trying to fix an acquisition problem by changing the personnel in the tower. Now, if somebody can explain to me how you change the people in the tower and it changes your acquisition issues, I don't understand. We do have an acquisition problem in the federal government. That doesn't need to just be corrected for FAA, that needs to be corrected for all acquisitions. It drives me crazy the number of agencies that I talk with that say, well, we're still maintaining legacy hardware and legacy software, and we have security issues because of all those things. That is not true in most businesses. So we do need to be able to change how we buy, the process for that, and the speed of that. But changing the people in the tower doesn't do that.
You guys got some work to do to catch up with Representative Russell. First, I discovered I'm not the only guy with the asparagus issue, and now I can take this back to Tulsa with me to pack the dogs. That's a good line. Senator Langford, this one is addressed to you. What are your opinions on the Saudi arms deal? Some senators are trying to block the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia because of the country's involvement in the Yemeni civil war. Will you join them? Why or why not? Also, what did you learn from your trip to Iraq and Syria? This one is from Kelsey Schlotthauer of the Grove Sun.
Yeah, so let me try to hit a couple of those points quickly. Here's the problem with the Saudi arms deal and tabling amendment that is out there currently. The tabling amendment is a very specific group of arms that they're trying to block from being sold to Saudi Arabia. They are precision guided munitions. Why would we want to tell the Saudis, all we will sell you is dumb bombs and not do precision guided weapons and think that that helps reduce civilian casualties? I don't understand. It's the wrong targeting that they're trying to actually focus in on. The reason that we do arms sales in some of those areas is to try to bring some stability and to try to develop partnerships. The Saudis are engaged with us in trying to fight against ISIS and flying some of their aircraft and be able to do some of the sorties that are happening. So the Jordanians, there are multiple others that are in the region. That is a benefit to us, both in pilot training, as many of them are in Enid every year doing pilot training, when it is beneficial to us to be able to maintain and make sure if they go to war, that they're not executing it correctly, we can just tell them we're going to temporarily suspend actually spare parts to you or resupplies to you. That de-accelerates the war in the area. If they're getting all their supplies from China and Russia and from North Korea, they're going to sell them as much as they can, as fast as they can, as often as they can. They're not concerned about the escalation. We are. So it is important that we maintain that. But the target of this particular tabling for the Saudis is the absolutely wrong direction to limit them from getting precision weapons and to only sell them dumb bombs. That increases civilian casualties. As far as what I can gain from being in Iraq and Syria, obviously many of us have been in the region many times on it. Steve obviously serving in the region before. You pick up a little bit each time that you're there as far as the progress of what's happening. Meeting with the leadership in Iraq and Syria, the dominant thing that comes out from all of our military leadership is that the Iraqis are fighting the war in Iraq now. They are leading the fight. They're on the lines in Mosul. There's a very small element still left to be able to retake Mosul. It's the old city. It's the section that you imagine when you think about Middle Eastern cities that are streets so narrow you can't even get a car down, crowded marketplaces. That area is still held by ISIS. The rest of Mosul has been liberated. But the Iraqis are fighting the battle in Mosul. They still have the Sinjar Valley to go. They still have some areas in the west to go. But there are only 3 regions left where ISIS has any stranglehold at all left in Iraq. In Syria, ISIS only has the Euphrates River Valley. And in Syria, the Syrians are fighting the battle in Syria. Everyone keeps talking about the Kurds fighting now. If you use the term the Kurds in the area, please try to define which Kurds, because the Kurds all don't agree with each other either. The Iraqi Kurds fight the Syrian Kurds, and not all the Syrian Kurds like each other. And even within those groups, they have political parties and strong differences. So there is no unanimous opinion of the Kurds. And so when we arm an area of the Kurds, it's a very specific group targeting a very specific region for a specific task for that. The retaking of Raqqa that's currently happening is being led by the Kurds, but most of the fighting forces are Arabs. The Kurds are the well-trained generals, though, but the fighting force are Arabs there. So it's not a Kurdish military that's fighting, it's a Kurdish Arab military fighting, but the Kurds are the experienced generals, and they're the ones actually leading the fight. The only area that's left is that area of the Euphrates Valley. That is a significant area, not only to Syria, but it's also to ISIS. It's not a simple part, but we're on track that we could actually have ISIS driven out from every area that they currently dominate within the next year and a half. That's taking it a step at a time. The bigger issue for us is what happens next.
If I could just piggyback a little bit on why it's important that we don't distance Saudi Arabia. If it were not for Saudi Arabia and Egypt's leadership in Yemen, we would have seen that country completely flipped to terrorism and Iranian influence. As it stands, because of the Saudi Arabian and Egyptian forces that have fought there, using a lot of these munitions and arms that we're trying to replace, you now have over 2/3 of the country has been restored to that government. This was a government that was friendly in assisting us in the fighting of terrorism, even though you had acts of terror while we were there, like the USS Cole and others. With regard to Egypt, and you've seen recent activities where ISIS and kind of their death throes are trying to get very public attacks. They're not necessarily mass, but they're public, like with the Coptic Christians, or what we see in London, different places like that. But bear in mind that Saudi Arabia and Egypt is fighting ISIS in Libya. They're also fighting in Yemen, and we see Saudi Arabia has to take the lead. We've been the first to say, why don't you take the lead and fight these problems yourself? And then we're disingenuous by turning around and saying, but we're not going to help you do it. We want you to do it, but we're not going to help you do it. So you can't have it both ways. You have to make a choice. Either they provide for their regional defense, and we assist them with the implements, or they can't, and we'll be forced to.
To make one other quick comment on Syria as well, that this is Game of Thrones there. There's the people that are fighting together to retake Raqqa. As soon as Raqqa is retaken, they're going to fight each other. There's not unanimity there by any means. There's at least 9 different opinions about the direction that it's going to go. If I mean opinions, I mean individuals and groups that will fight each other, and that sometimes fight together, sometimes fight against each other on it. It's extremely complicated. One driving force I try to remind everybody is Assad is the one individual that the entire country, with the exception of his particular fighting force, that everyone opposes. You cannot return 10 million refugees back to their homes in Syria with Assad still there. So we can't take our eye off of two things. One is the fight, once it finishes with ISIS, we still have to deal with Assad. And the second part of this is Iran is waiting until we pull out and the Russians pull out, and so they can dominate the vacuum there. That is not to the benefit long-term of national interest or the regional interest for Iran to dominate all the way from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, all the way down to Yemen. That is not to the region's stability there. So it is still very important to us that we stay engaged, knowing that Iran specifically is waiting for us to leave.
Well, I apologize to those whose questions I didn't get to. The time has gone very quickly, and we just appreciate all of the time you guys have given us today and for being here. We look forward to seeing you again next year, and thank you all for your time.